see what happens with that and what they rule. I'm hoping that they'll, push for a mandatory rematch before any of the mandatory challenge, I think, can take place. So that'll be interesting to see how it plays out. But I think for Lewis, he needs to really run it back, see if he can overturn, the first fight, because Paddy won the fight despite the disqualification, in my opinion. But I think the disqualification was totally disproportionate to the offence.
You mentioned, obviously, on the TV and everything, the commentators being able to hear the bell, but I can second that in the fact of being in the arena for the fight. It was very hard to hear the bell. I think a lot of us guys on the media row hadn't noticed that the round had ended. Do you feel there should have been a little bit more lenience for Paddy? Yes, okay, the shot was after, but like you said, give the 5 minutes. Do you feel the disqualification very harsh? Probably the most harsh thing they could have done.
Don Charles recently shared his thoughts on Joseph Parker's media workout. Let's just say he wasn't impressed. In fact, he laughed at what he saw. According to Charles, Dubois was in top shape and would have easily beaten Parker. They didn't choose Parker because they were afraid. They picked him because they saw a mismatch. Charles made it clear that Dubois was ready for a fight, while Parker's workout didn't even impress him. This raises a big question. Was Parker really lucky to avoid Dubois, or was it all part of the plan? The tension is building for what's to come.
I think if you watch the fight, Paddy was trying to create a bit of distance when Lewis came in using his lead hand, and on that occasion he just got it wrong, caught him with the elbow. If anything, that's the one instance in the fight where I could maybe say, fair enough, you've caught him with your elbow there, it's fair enough to be a point deduction. But I don't think it was intentional, and I don't it was an isolated incident. So that shows you it was an accident. There wasn't any malice, there wasn't any intention. And you know what? It's the fight game as well. These things happen. Do you know what I mean? It's
John Charles just exposed the truth behind Dubois' shocking exit from the Parker fight, and it clearly shows pure fear. Stan Dubois wasn't just worried, he was panicking, dragging Charles upstairs as if the house was on fire because Daniel was supposedly falling apart. But here's where it gets really suspicious. Dubois couldn't even explain what was wrong. He just muttered that he wasn't feeling well. Then Frank Warren rushed in with a doctor to approve the excuse. This wasn't about illness, it was about self-preservation. Dubois saw the storm Parker was bringing and ran before the destruction could begin. He didn't dodge a fight, he dodged a disaster, but by choosing to run, he's now signed up for an even worse nightmare. Usyk isn't. Parker, he's a surgeon in the ring. When Dubois steps in, he won't just lose, he'll be torn apart. No more running now.
I don't think the Lawrence Okoli fight makes much sense. He's fighting react poor.
I had a method around that one.
Okay, okay.
So my method around that one, there have been talks in the past, supposedly according to Joe Gallagher, about Joyce versus Okoli, so there's already a bit of a storyline there. So you bump Okoli up to fight Joyce, and then that's where you can bring in someone like Jermaine Franklin a season.
Don Charles recently shared his thoughts on Joseph Parker's media workout. Let's just say he wasn't impressed. In fact, he laughed at what he saw. According to Charles, Dubois was in top shape and would have easily beaten Parker. They didn't choose Parker because they were afraid. They picked him because they saw a mismatch. Charles made it clear that Dubois was ready for a fight, while Parker's workout didn't even impress him. This raises a big question. Was Parker really lucky to avoid Dubois, or was it all part of the plan? The tension is building for what's to come.
Then I think Anthony Joshua and Joseph Parker is the fight that makes the most sense for those guys.
Who do you think wins between Dubois and Usyk?
Probably Usyk. I think you'd be foolish to bet against him. I think Dubois has made a lot of improvements under Don Charles. I think it's a tougher fight for Usyk. But I think, he's proved himself to be an all-time great. And although Dubois might be able to put him under.
Nick Campbell isn't holding back when it comes to the heavyweight division. He's all in on Usyk, but let's take a moment to talk about Dubois. Campbell is nearly certain that if Dubois ever faces Usyk, it will be a harsh reality check. Dubois' attempts to grab attention, especially after a string of disappointing performances, make Campbell question if he's truly ready for top fighters. Let's be honest, Dubois folded against Joyce and barely scraped through the Parker fight. Now, he's being called a serious threat to Usyk. That's laughable. Usyk is on a completely different level, and Campbell has no time for anyone who thinks Dubois can compete with the best. Sure, Dubois might have power, but against a strategist like Usyk, that's just wishful thinking. If they do meet, Campbell predicts a one-sided demolition where Usyk shows just how far out of Dubois' league he really is.
That's going to happen in September. It's part of Canelo's 4-fight deal with Rhea season. Alexander Usyk versus Daniel Dubois. Now, this is the interesting one. Daniel Dubois was meant to fight Joseph Parker 2 weeks ago, but he pulled out due to an illness. And all of a sudden, there's rambling, there's words going around, rumors going around that they already signed a deal.
Meanwhile, this is the fight everyone's been waiting for. Usyk versus Dubois. But before you get too excited, let's take a closer look at what's been happening behind the scenes. Just 2 weeks ago, Dubois was supposed to face Joseph Parker, but out of nowhere, he pulled out due to illness. Then rumors started that Dubois and Usyk already agreed to fight each other, probably in June at Wembley Stadium. Doesn't that seem a little too convenient? Dubois avoids Parker, only to take on the #1 fighter in the division. Let's be clear, this isn't about fighting the best, it's about picking the right opponents. Usyk is the final boss, and Dubois is just another stepping stone on his way to dominance. Don't be fooled by the hype. If this fight happens, Usyk will dominate Dubois with his superior skill, power, and mental strength. In June at Wembley, expect another Usyk masterclass, and Dubois will be left with nothing but regret.
But you're better. All of a sudden, he wants Usyk. I don't believe he really wanted to fight Joseph Parker in the first place. I think when he beat AJ, it was in his mind already that he wanted Usyk. I don't want that banana peel fight. I might fight somebody and lose, and then I don't get the Usyk fight. And pretty much, this is a pussy. This is a bitch-made move.
He revealed his true colors. He was never really interested in fighting Joseph Parker. The moment he barely beat AJ, his focus shifted, not to proving himself in the ring, but to Usyk and the huge payday waiting for him. Parker was too dangerous, too risky for a fighter not ready to face the heat. A loss to Parker could have shattered his rise. So, what does Dubois do? He pulls out with a string of excuses, fully aware that Parker would have exposed his weaknesses and broken the illusion of invincibility. But now, all of a sudden, he thinks he's ready for Usyk. This isn't about proving who's truly the best. It's about protecting his fragile ego and fattening his bank account. If Dubois truly believed in himself, he would have taken on the real challenge, fought Parker, and earned his way up. Instead, he's dodging the tough fights and waiting for an easy shot at greatness. Is he a real contender, or just another overhyped fighter avoiding the true threats?
But Dubois is now expected to chase a rematch with Alexander Usyk, who holds the WBA, WBC, or WBO and Ring World Heavyweight titles. Dubois' dad, Stan Dubois, briefly spoke to the Ring about his son's future plans and what caused him to pull out of his scheduled fight last week with Joseph Parker. He said, "Next we want Usyk. It's frustrating about the Parker fight, but he couldn't fight with an infection. Usyk is who we're going after."
On the other hand, Stan Deo, Daniel's father, recently opened up to Asterisk the Ring about his son's future and the growing frustration surrounding his sudden withdrawal from the highly anticipated Joseph Parker fight due to a viral infection. While the Parker fight was undoubtedly a setback, Stan made it clear that the focus is now entirely on Usyk. The heavyweight division is on edge, with Dubois eyeing a potential showdown with Usyk, one that could dramatically change the entire division. Fans are eagerly waiting to see if Dubois can bounce back and redeem himself after his earlier loss. With Usyk holding the title as the undisputed heavyweight champion, this upcoming clash could be the defining moment of Dubois' career and a game changer for the heavyweight scene. The big question is, can Dubois rise to the occasion and dethrone the reigning king, or will Usyk's dominance remain uncontested? The stakes have never been higher.
Why should it be Dubois or Usyk? Why don't they step up and let him fight? But listen, I don't pay the money. It's not my, you know, it's if they want that, but I don't like that. I think it's wrong. I think Joe should be given his. He'll get a fight. He'll get a
Spencer
fight.
Brown couldn't hold back his frustration, and it's clear why. He sees the politics behind the scenes and isn't backing down. Instead of giving Joseph Parker the shot he's earned, some in the boxing world are prioritizing their own interests, keeping real challenges out of reach. The big question is, why are the so-called top names avoiding Parker? Why is he being overlooked after dominating his opponents with such brutal precision? On the other hand, while Brown isn't making the financial decisions, he's not afraid to speak his mind. This whole situation reeks of politics. Parker has done everything needed to challenge the best, but behind-the-scenes maneuvering continues to block his path. Brown is certain that Parker's next major fight is on the horizon, but will the sport finally do the right thing? Or will corrupt forces rob Parker of what he truly deserves?